Audio's good.
And we decided to push this meeting out because people had questions about ranked choice voting. That's the ballot initiative that's on the ballot. And then Ron Zimmerman on ranked choice voting. So without further ado, I turn it over to Ron Zimmerman for ranked choice voting.
Thank you, everybody, for attending. Really appreciate it. I'll give you a quick overview of us real quickly. I'll talk a lot of summary of sort of ranked choice voting. Talk about some of the benefits that are being achieved across the country, and then really want to try to save as much time as we can to answer questions. I like to try to be out of here by 12:30, even after all the questions. So we'll try to not keep you here too long. So appreciate everyone showing up. Who here feels they understand ranked choice pretty well? Okay, all right, that's okay. I always want to get the temperature so I understand where people sort of stand in their understanding when we get started. So what I'd like to do is let's do a quick background. So by the way, Ron Zimmerman, and I've been doing this for we first incorporated a nonprofit in 2019. We first passed Ann Arbor in 2021, 73% of the vote. Ferndale is already passed as well, and we have 3 more cities on the ballot this year. So we are think voters not. Oh, go ahead.
There's some of us who have a harder time hearing. Would you speak up?
Sure, sure.
Thank you.
Have an echo. No, hold on. You know why I have an echo? Mute yourself. And I mute myself. I'm not getting the. I'll just deal with it. So we are a nonprofit. So when you think of 10 of us that started this about 4 years ago, 5 of us came out off the Voters Not Politicians, getting rid of gerrymandering in 2018. So we were very excited that we were able to be part of the leadership team there to help get gerrymandering. And so we wanted to start this. So we have always had our core values very, very similar to Voters Not Politicians. We are 100% volunteer organization. I've led this organization for 3.5 years now, and I do it completely for free. I don't get paid. There's certainly more money has gone out from me than come back for sure. All grassroots, all volunteer, nonpartisan. These are core values that we stick to pretty staunchly. So we really try to stick to really approaching this from a nonpartisan perspective. Our mission is very simple. We're just trying to bring ranked choice voting to the table. As much as we can have it be adopted, that's kind of our mission. And some of you might know some of these people on here from the very beginning. Katie Fahey. How many people in the room know who Katie Fahey is? Right, she's one of the founders of Voters Not Politicians. I mean, she's been one of our, we sort of call it our advisory council. They're not really our board, but they're people that we go to really get guidance at multiple times throughout the year for what we do. Brian Cannon was with Katie Fahey of Virginia. So they got rid of gerrymandering in Virginia. Brian Cannon's part of that. And then we have, also big national groups to help give us guidance from United America. I don't know if you guys know United America, but United America gave millions of dollars to Voters Not Politicians to help get the gerrymandering over the finish line, to get rid of the gerrymandering here in Michigan. And then we have a number of the groups. Jamie Lyons, Eddie, she's had her hands full. Anyone who knows Jamie, she's actually from the local area. And she's now head of Voters Not Politicians. Nancy Lang moved on. So she's always been a real good sort of, when I need advice, I call Jamie. She's always been great. So not some crazy organization that just popped out of nowhere and decided, how do we do this? So I'll talk quickly about, I think it's really important before you talk about ranked choice to kind of understand why. Gerrymandering made sense, right? People were drawing lines weird for the advantage of politicians and not for voters. There's actually a similar theme here, right? If you look at what the cities are doing to kind of combat us bringing ranked choice voting in the state of Michigan, it's very similar, right? When you think about the current system, what are some things that drives you nuts about plurality voting? That's what we have today. People think that winners of elections today are 50% winners or they have a majority. They don't. It's just whoever gets the most votes. That could be 65%, it could be 20%. In a given election, right? It's just who gets the most vote. So people have this sort of feeling of this lesser of two evils, right? You feel like, oh, I really like that independent, or I really like this candidate, but man, they're polling kind of low, even though they really represent who I am. I don't even vote for the person that best represents me because I'm wasting my vote. Can't vote for the Green Party, can't vote for Libertarian, can't vote for the Independent because I'm wasting my vote. Right? That's a really strong psychology that doesn't physically exist in our voting system anywhere, but it's psychology of the last couple of decades that is ingrained into our brains of like, we only vote for one of the two. And more in Michigan, you're only getting two options anymore to vote for. You're not even getting more voices into the process because of that wasted vote concept. Split voting, I'm going to talk about in a second, because that is the #1 thing that, you know, there's lots of benefits to ranked choice. That's the #1, but I'm going to get some great examples of that. It also fails us because when you have a duopoly, and a duopoly system, two parties, uses a plurality system, really easy to manipulate. Really easy to manipulate, especially on the split voting idea. And I'll get to that in a second. But what does that lead to? And you can see what it's led to the last 30 years. Incentivizes to polarize, right? Wealthy people pumping money into the process, trying to figure out how the media can polarize us, can sensationalize every little mountain out of a molehill that we see all the time, right? Voter groups start to feel disenfranchised, and I'll talk about that, how it helped New York City. But, you know, we have some local examples here of voter disenfranchisement, and that's one thing the plurality does too. And I'll talk about that in a second. Incentives to gridlock. Plurality voting, man, if it's only one or the other and no one gives, no one ever, you just stop compromising, you'll never get anything done, you're just stuck. And that's where we are. Every 4 years, we're more and more stuff. We think we can't get more stuff, and we get more stuff. Okay. Not to mention negative campaigning. Who here loves negative campaigning? Right? Big benefit Maine is seeing from ranked choice voting. Negative campaigning has almost gone away in Maine. And I'll explain how that happens in a second. So, you know, the split voting thing is really based on this whole idea of the majority problem, we call it. You would think, okay, if 70% of the community is purple, you would think, all right, you're going to get a purple winner, right? Not always. And the reason for that is, if you're in a community that feels 70% purple, you're probably going to get more candidates in that race that are purple, right? Makes sense. Oops, where am I going? Going the wrong way. Sorry about that. Right? You get more candidates in the race that are purple. So you would think they would win, but not so fast. All it takes is 2 more candidates to enter the race. They split the vote. And the person that only really represents 30% of the community wins. And if they're well funded, election after election on election, there's a pretty good chance they keep winning. And they might even represent the majority of the community. You know, and we presented this and we said, okay, well, we have this mindset, you know, everyone's heard the idea of the spoiler. Someone's going to get into an election and spoil an election, right? There's 2 more candidates going to enter the race and they're going to spoil it for purple. And we one of our first town halls, we gave this presentation, and there was a 10-year-old sitting in the back of the room and said, well, which of those candidates spoiled the election? And even the 10-year-old, right, is smart enough to say, it's the system, right? It's plurality voting that spoiled this, not any one candidate, or not you as a voter who decided to vote for this person or this person instead of that person, right? It's the system that's spoiling. It's a flaw in plurality voting, right? And that's one of the major things ranked choice is trying to address. And you don't have to go a whole lot more further. Sorry, I'm really bad at moving my slides. I only have it. Here, understand what happened in District 13, just this last cycle.
No.
Are you aware of what happened there? Right? Democratic primary. For the first time in 67 years, the Democrats are not, because you know, this is a U.S. federal congressional seat for Detroit. That's what District 13, right? It's 74.something% in the city of Detroit. So for the first time in 67 years, they are not represented by a Black person right now in Washington for Detroit. And the reason for that, if you look at the election, there were 9 candidates 8 were black. 1 was not. Guess who wins? And they won, and they won with 28% of the vote.
28%.
28%. And it doesn't mean that Sharif necessarily will be a bad representative. I you know, he might do fine. But you can understand when I talked about disenfranchisement, think about if you're in a community that's 74%, it's like the more candidates you run, the less chance you have of winning. That's disenfranchising for voters. Right? So we have an example of this right in our backyard. Right? And you're gonna see this again the next cycle, because Sharif's gonna probably run again, and there's probably gonna be a few candidates. Right? And it just splits all the votes. So you had a winner with 28%, 72% of the voters didn't vote for the winner. We don't think of this because we've been living this our whole lives. Right? We think this is just the way it is. We don't even really think. This is what 72% didn't even vote for the winner in this election.
Will you explain what how ranked choice voting would have changed?
I will.
this, Please.
I will, I'm gonna go through that example. You're absolutely right. But I want to explain the split voting, right? We feel it right here. This is, you don't have to go to New York City. I'll show you some examples, but we don't have to go there to find the examples. It's right in our backyard. Right? So, and that's all I'll say there, because I do want to keep going. Make sure we have time for questions. I'll do this really, really quickly, but there's a number of benefits of ranked choice voting. Right? That changes. So I talked about, you know, split voting, right? But what drives ranked choice voting, so before I explain exactly how it works, right? What I want you to understand is ranked choice voting, what drives all the benefits. The small tweak you're doing is you're saying that a winner of a ranked choice election is to get 50% of the vote to win. Maine uses it statewide, Alaska uses it statewide. 2 more states are on the ballot next year. There's 50 cities already have implemented and 50 more in the process of implementing it. It's not vaporware anymore. It's not like some, you know, theory. 50% changes the incentives, right? That's huge. So think about it now. If you're running in a race where you know, hey, there's 3, 4, 5 candidates, no one's gonna get 50%. You're no longer just gonna campaign to your base. And your extreme, often extreme bases, more and more every year, more and more extreme on both sides, right? You can't just pander to an extreme base and win. You have to now reach out to a broader swath of the community in order to win that election. Right? Even if you are heavily funded, right? You still have to appeal to 50% to win. Right? That changes how you campaign. You're not going to negative campaign anymore against your other candidates because you're going to piss off other voters who like those candidates. And they're not going to vote for you second and third, and that's what you need to win the election. That 50% is the key to everything. It changes the incentives. How parties put candidates in, how candidates run their elections. That's what we're going for. Change the incentive. If they're incented differently, they will behave differently. It's like anything in life. It's how businesses run. If you set different metrics for your business to accomplish, you're going to get different outcomes. Just change the goals, change the incentives. So that's huge. Less negative campaigning, more issue focused, more equitable. I'm going to talk about that in a second. It expands voter choice. So what you see in ranked choice over a period of time, you start to see more Green Party folks run again. You start to see more libertarians run again, more independents running again. Anywhere this gets implemented, you start to see more people running, even in the primaries. And I'm talking to mostly a Dem crowd, right? But even in the primaries, you're going to start to see more diverse candidates running your primaries, which is what we want. We want more voices in the process, not less. We don't want just 2 choices anymore. We want more people expressing how they think they can solve problems in our cities, in our states, in our country. Right? Winners are more accepted. There's always winners and losers, even in ranked choice. But at least you know if your candidate lost, the one that did win didn't get 20%. You know the one that won got a majority of the vote. Yes. That's easier to swallow. And I'll tell you on the 50%, the thing I forgot to mention that I think is most important, or as important as winning with 50%, you need 50% to get reelected in ranked choice. That's powerful. That's a higher bar. So when you have to get 50% to get reelected, you darn well better do what you said you were going to do for the community when you ran as a campaign. It's easier to move on. Yeah.
So if nobody was 50%, what happens?
That's what I'm gonna. I will get to that. I know.
Okay.
I just want to hit the what's bad why it's better, and then I'm gonna walk you right into exactly how it works, so you can see it. And you will see it, when you see how it works, you'll understand how negative campaigning goes away and all this stuff happens. But yeah, I wanted to point out, voters like it, saves money. Now, we don't do runoffs here in Michigan, but think about Georgia, what we've seen in the last 2 cycles. I don't know if you guys know, every time in Georgia they do the runoff and they have to bring everybody back to the polls, it's $70 million to the state. Just bring everybody back and vote for the final 2, like the top 2. Ranked choice, you don't have to bring everybody back, you get a 50% winner, it's over. You don't have, the money you save. Just ranked choice doesn't get rid of money in politics, like that's a more mature thing we're going after, but it does help reduce its influence. But it doesn't inherently get rid of money, but when you have to get 50%, you start to erode the influence of that money because even your highly funded candidate still has to appeal to the whole community, right? Obviously, less polarization, less gridlock. So I will just have a couple more slides on the benefits, and then I'll get to exactly how it works. So bear with me. I really want to tell this story. How many people know about ranked choice voting being used in New York City?
And it took forever,
Okay, no, I'm glad you said that.
the results.
I was just gonna say, what do you remember? Who remembers it took forever? Anybody else?
That was the.
Yeah, last one took forever. Yeah, it does take a little longer.
Yeah, it
And we'll talk about that in a second. When it's computerized, like we can do it in Michigan, it can still go pretty darn fast, but we'll get that. So, people think of New York City, they remember, yeah, there was they had a test when they first tried to run the ranked choice calculation, they still had test data in the system. They were using to test it for the months leading up to the election, which messed it all up and they had to start again. It was, yeah, so some of their execution got more publicity. This is what should have gotten publicity. So here's voters, 2021, very first time to use ranked choice election. They were worried voters aren't going to come out, they're going to be confused, this is too hard to understand. Malarkey. Yeah. So, right, so look, their elections always go up and down, right? Because sometimes you have an incumbent election, right? And then, this went down to the incumbent election, and then it went back up because the incumbent was term limited, and you had all these new candidates running in New York City, I remember in that race. So it was gonna go back up. The point is, even with ranked choice, it was the second highest turnout in the history of New York City. And it was close. It was almost the highest turnout, right? So that's great. And that puts to bed the old, people don't want this. They were excited about ranked choice in New York City. Not only for just total voter turnout, but you would think like on a ranked choice ballot, it's going to take more time to fill out. It's going to take whatever. People won't spend as long filling out their ballot. Again, malarkey. Down ballot voting went up 5%. Now, if I just told you it doubled from the last cycle to this cycle for the total turnout, doesn't sound like a lot, but anyone who's ever worked, has been a clerk or wants to advocate for more people to come out to vote, 5% increase in down ballot is almost unheard of. I mean, you're lucky if it varies 0.1% from one election to another, down ballot voting. So 5% or more people filled out the entire ballot, or at least, down ballot voting. That's good. It engaged people more. Ranked choice brought them in to use for their elections for their most important leaders, but it made them stick around to vote for all the others as well. And it's not just New York City. Every single city implementing ranked choice. Oops. Sorry. The light blue, sorry, I should take my finger off. The light blue line represents post-ranked choice implementation. It always goes up. Maybe not every election from the next, but generally the line on ranked choice voting after it gets implemented for increased turnout, which is one of the #1 metrics for any election type. You want the line going up. We want to start getting people more engaged, more votes, not feeling disenfranchised and staying at home, or feel like they're going to waste their vote and hell, I don't like any of them, I'm going to stay at home. We want people to come back and get involved in the process. It's happening.
Have you compared that data about increase in voting and
To like baseline it with other cities, it didn't.
other cities that didn't? And
I
what
really
it
should get that data.
Really should.
I'm a process engineer.
You really should.
I knew exactly where you were going before you got out of your mouth. No, we actually should show that, right? I guess The more important point I sometimes don't want to leave people with is that the point is, it's going up. Even if it's slightly less or slightly more than maybe other elections aren't using ranked choice, the point is, it's not turning people off, right? They're coming out and they're using it and they're liking it and it keeps going up over time. Yeah, go ahead.
Have you also looked at other variables that may have, involved increase in, voting?
Yeah, we have. That's why I mentioned the one about, that this was not an incumbent election. That's another reason why the line went up, right? So that's in terms of turnout in New York
So
City.
things like, mail-in voting and, all the other stuff.
And I'll talk to you about, on this example too, with the women results, right? There's a good question, I think, to be asked about that on this.
Thank you.
But I really want you to show this line, because there's another huge benefit of ranked choice voting around equitable representation. We're kind of getting to what I was talking about in Michigan with Detroit, right? With 8 Black people, 1 not, right? Similar to that. But let's just look at the results in New York City. Women. In the history of New York City, just by looking at that graph, I'm trying to put it in a different context so you get it. New York City is an overall mayor. There's 5 boroughs, each with 10 people in their city council. That's 51 positions. So 51 major positions in New York City. In the history of New York City, women have never had higher than 35% of those seats. In their entire, and that's a pretty liberal city. You would think 35, even better. At the time, right before the ranked choice election, the day before the election happened, at that point in time, they only had, this is 2021, they only had 28%. Someone wanted to give me a guess on how many first ranked choice elections. Didn't take 2 cycles or 3 cycles, 1 cycle, 1 election. Guess what percentage of the seats women now have? 30?
I'm just reading the chart.
Well, what I'm pointing at is the highest was 35. At the time of the election, it was 28.
Oh, I see.
That's where it is now.
Yeah.
52%.
There you go.
Now, does 50% sound about what it makes sense? Makes sense, right? Talk about a disenfranchised group. Not just in New York City, a lot of places. And here's the thing. People make the point, well, was there other factors that played into this? And it was funny because someone said, and I have Letitia James, who's the AG for New York. I have a great video of her, and I can't figure out how to plug it in to get it to play in my presentation. But she was giving a presentation how a great impact that ranked choice has for women getting elected finally, or getting their own representation. And she said, hey, you were kind of worried because of Me Too. Now, Me Too impacted this last one too. This was in 2018. So Me Too had a little impact there, but there were definitely a lot more women running. So they thought, okay, well, yeah, the number should have gone up. Well, there's a little bit to that, but when you understand why this happened, why were they only getting 28%, 30%, 35%? It's the split voting. So think about it. There's 50 wards. Every cycle, there would be 7, 8, 9 wards where 2 strong women, maybe 2 of the 3 top candidates were 2 strong women. The women demographic is a voting block. Not all women vote for women. I don't think they're sensible. They pick the best candidate, but it is a voting block. Women vote if they think it's a strong woman. They'll vote, but when you only can vote for one, it splits the vote. So women, even the more women that ran and the more good women that run actually reduce their chances of winning in plurality voting. You split the vote. That's frustrating as hell. I mean, I can't imagine, like, that must have just been frustrating in one cycle. Sometimes they think this takes 2, 3 cycles to happen. In one cycle, they achieved it. Right? That's pretty powerful. That's split voting. That's what number one thing ranked choice is going after. Stop the split voting. Get 50%. Now you can walk in and say, I want this woman, my favorite, but this is my second favorite. So if that first woman you chose gets eliminated in the process, which we're getting to. If they get eliminated in the process to get to 50%, your vote transfers to the second one. That eliminates that splitting of that purple we saw before, right? If you have 1 purple candidate, you're going to win. If you have 3 purple candidates, it's not hard to lose, right? Another one, equitable representation. People of color. amazing. So this is, like, I'm pulling this right from the deck that came out after the election, right? So I kind of used something that was already, vetted and so on and so forth. And what they chose to show was how there was a lot of white before, right? And now there's more people of color on city council afterward, right? But I don't think that's near as powerful as showing it. Well, here's the incoming, right? That's the population of New York City.
Wow.
If you don't label the top of the charts, you wouldn't know which one was the 50 people racial makeup or the city makeup. Like, this should be, this should be all over we should find ways to get this all over the television, right? I mean, this is powerful in the first cycle. And again, the exact same reason, right? And actually, the people of color is the number one reason New York City did it. The people of color were the ones feeling the most disenfranchised the last 25 years in New York City. Detroit just had it happen once last year that I showed you. This has been going on every 4 years. So you get like a Hispanic community, you have a strong Hispanic ward in New York City, 60%. The more candidates they run, the less chance they have of getting a Hispanic candidate. Because it just keeps splitting the Hispanic vote. So we're getting frustrated, like, Jesus, how many people do we have to run to win? But it works just the opposite in plurality, because that's the root sort of problem with plurality voting. Right? So that's why you get this outcome. The goal isn't to get a exact racial mixture of your council to your city. But in some cities, that is important. Some wards, they are heavily Black or they're heavily Hispanic. They want equitable representation, and plurality system doesn't get them that. So what they literally would have to do, think about Detroit, they would, all the 8 Black candidates next time, and this is literally what's probably gonna happen. They're gonna probably all get together, say, who do we think are the best 1 or 2 to run, and all the rest of you get out.
They tried to do that this last year and nobody would drop out.
You shouldn't have to.
I know you shouldn't have to, but that would
Like,
have been a better.
You remember the Democratic primary, right? Biden, Klobuchar, Pete.
Yeah.
Klobuchar and Pete had to get out.
Yeah.
They had to consolidate the voting power because they were splitting it. We shouldn't be in a system where we should be forcing candidates who might be pretty good and who have a lot of support to get out of the race. This is just crazy stuff, like self-selecting and stuff. Like, ranked choice just takes care of that. You'll find out who the 50% winner is. Okay, I will jump real quickly to. Sorry, that was my like, it's math. By the way, exit polling, 71st ranked choice in New York City, 77% approval. Loved it. That's, again, that doesn't sound like anything if you don't know anything about anything over high 60s. People hate elections. So anything over 60% nowadays, or 65% is amazing. They had 7% the very first time. Plus they saved $10 million because they didn't have to do it. Right? So let me get down to the fun. How does it work? For the people that don't know how it works. The very first US congressional race that Maine ever ran was ranked choice voting. There was 2 independents. Independent, Democrat, Republican. These both came out of primaries. Right? This is actually a low number of candidates for Maine historically.
They're in alphabetical.
They just tend to be in alphabetical order there. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about you.
And they tend to have more candidates running historically, which is why they took on ranked choice voting. For their congressional seats, for their governor, they just kept having people winning 26, 27, 28% over and over again. Because it's a very diverse state. When they say they're independent in Maine, they're not kidding. Like, they vote all over the board. Ideologically diverse. Ideologically. Yeah. Good point. Yeah. So let's tell you how this works. Pretty powerful. Again, first one. We're not going to go through how this happened, and then I'll explain why it happened, because it's important to understand as what is the why. Right. So the first round comes in, and in ranked choice voting, so over here is what you need to get to 50%. So that's a number of votes. This is where you need to get to. That's 50% of the votes. Right? So you can see no one got there. But in ranked choice voting, if someone already had out here, it's over. You don't even use the ranking. It doesn't even come into play. Someone gets 50%, done. Okay. No one did. So how does it work? So in this order, you start with the candidate that got the least amount of votes. So that's Will. Right? So you look at Will. Will is now eliminated from contention. He has the least amount of votes in first place. He's pretty far behind. He's eliminated. And what you do is you pull out all the ballots. You don't do this physically. Computer does this. So this goes almost instantaneous. You calculate plurality, you calculate ranked choice. It's a computer. It does it like that. So you look at all the ballots that came in for Will. He's out of contention. You look at those ballots and you say, who did those voters vote for second? Who was their second choice? So in other words, if Will wasn't in the race, if he had never been in the race, who would they have voted for? So you look at that and you redistribute it. Right? And it makes sense. Most of them were independent. Will's an independent. Most of their second place votes went to the other independent. Right? But some for the Republicans, some for the Democrats. Right? So you add it up, you re-add it up. Does someone have 50%? No, we haven't gotten that bar on the right-hand side yet. Right? I'll finish this and I'll take questions. And then, so what happens here is that what is none? What does that mean? Yeah, none meant like it was Will or die. I'm dying on the hill for Will. No rhyme intended. So I'm gonna say the kids are hungry. I gotta get the out of here. I voted for Will. I'm an independent. Done. So now next, we still don't have someone at 50%. So what happens next?
You go to Tiffany.
Tiffany gets eliminated. Right? You look at all of her voter ballots and say, who did they vote for second? Okay. Now, some of them could have been third place votes. Some of them could have been Will, right? His voters went to Tiffany in the first round. And now it's going to the third place vote on those ballots and getting redistributed. And you can see by the colors what's going to happen.
Yep.
Now, so I know the audience is in front of. I didn't pick this example because of that outcome. I did it. This is the presentation Kevin Deegan Krause put together. I don't know if anyone knows Kevin Deegan Krause. He's head of education for Voters Not Politicians. He's amazing at putting slides together for us. But let me explain this real quickly, and then I'll get to your question.
You answered it all.
Okay, cool. The none got big, right? Because there, by the time you get to the end, you have a lot of people that just didn't, rank as many. And it was the first time. And it's the first time. But what I want you to notice, and why mathematically you always get a 50% winner. Notice the bar on the right-hand side. The goal. Watch how that goal moves. Where is it moving? It moves in. Because as soon as you have voters that have exhausted themselves from the process of their own accord, because they didn't vote, they didn't rank more, right? So that means the denominator of what you need to get to of your calculation 50% keeps going down based on the number of exhausted ballots. That's why you always get a 50% winner.
This means that if you vote for an unpopular candidate, you get 2 votes.
Nope.
No. Well, you would have a vote for the.
Maine, people have challenged Maine and Alaska. It went to federal court, was shot down pretty quickly. They tried to appeal to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court didn't even hear it.
Well, the Supreme Court makes some bad decisions. But
I'm just telling you that is a really arbitrary. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. The reason why,
We have 2 votes.
the
You
reason why
have a
this,
vote
Yep.
for the unpopular person, and then you have a vote for whoever you vote.
and here's why. Think of a normal runoff that isn't automated, like Georgia, right? You come in and you vote, nobody has 50%, and you come and vote again. You voted twice. You've got to come back for the runoff, right? And you voted again. Does that mean that you voted twice? No. It's the same exact logic for instant runoff or ranked choice, because your vote, and the reason why it's constitutional legal, right? And this passes the mustard pretty easily, is that your vote at any one time is only with one person. And only when your candidate that you voted for first with that vote is eliminated and no longer in contention, your vote now transfers to someone else, just like it would in a manual runoff. If you voted for the independent in Georgia, and now there's a runoff, you have to come back and choose either Republican or Democrat. That's not two different, it's not two different votes, right? That's
They
why.
have equal protection under the law. You don't have the people who voted for you getting a second vote. You would in a runoff.
That's true,
If they
because,
want it.
because their choice is still in the process. Why would you give them a second vote? Their candidate is still in the process.
But their vote is still factored.
Yeah.
Their vote is still being counted this next time.
But they had one vote, but not two.
Yeah.
The people don't-
Because I'm just saying, because their candidate, your logic would be like, if you came back for the runoff in Georgia, however you voted the first time, you should count again. That's kind of what you're saying. If it may,
I'm
Yeah.
saying in Georgia, if you come back, you have to come back and vote for either Bruce or Jared.
I know, but I'm saying, if you say these votes are only counted once, it's not fair because they're counted twice. These voted for two different people. I'm saying the analogy would
That's
be
all right. I'm just
two
saying-
votes for this, if your candidate's still in the race, your vote stays right where it is. Yep. But hey, go ahead.
I don't, explain why that would have changed Detroit, because if you have 8 people that are all voting for a black person and they want a black person to win. And they have 2 and 3 for choices, they still could lose to the white guy.
Let me come back to that one.
But am I right? Or,
The overall answer is you can't ever be 100% sure. You didn't do a ranked choice. You don't know what people's second and third place choices were in Detroit, but I will come back to that. We come back to that.
okay.
But I want to finish this slide, because I want to explain the why. And how it's changed Maine politics forever. Is because Bruce, guess what Bruce did in this campaign? Take a wild guess what Bruce decided. Well, he sued afterwards, but guess what he did in the campaign that caused him not to get too many second and third place votes? What do you think he did?
He did, negative.
You talk to Maine voters, they'll tell you that maybe one of the biggest asses that's ever run, right, for election. Just negative campaign and nasty. And they had people, Republican strategists around the country saying, don't negative campaign, like this is gonna hurt you. This is not how ranked choice works. Well, he did it anyway. And he really, and you can see, like, he got hardly any independent votes in the end. Right? By the way, Jared is still, 6 years later, is still the record. Right? Negative campaigning in Maine is almost completely gone away. Even by the Republicans, it didn't take them long to get it. When you break this down and you're a jerk, right? I mean, you're not getting a lot of second and third place votes, but you need to win a ranked choice election. You're nicer. Okay, nice is nice. But they're still gonna spend that money. They're still gonna send a mailer out. It's just not gonna have like the other candidate in hell's fury in the background. You're gonna go to hell if you vote for that person. Like, what crap we get before the election. It's ridiculous, right? What they're sending now, they're still spending that money on the mailer, but the mailer now is like, what are my top 5 issues? Why am I gonna solve, how can I be the candidate that can solve those issues better than my other? That's not negative campaigning. You're explaining to people why you think your experience, your ideas, your solutions better than the other person. That's what Maine wants to hear. That's what we all want to hear. We don't want the negative crap. Right? So that's probably telling me something.
You got about 20 minutes.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, I'll get to the question because I am almost done. What else do I want to say about that one? I think that was pretty much it. So I'm gonna come back to your question. So let's just quickly take that question. Sorry. This is why I need someone controlling the stage for me.
Are you talking about my question or a different person?
Your question.
Because along with that is say you've got a bunch of people running and you have 5 people that are the Democrats, like pro-choice, pro whatever, environment, blah, blah, blah. I don't necessarily see how they're gonna, that they could like cancel each other out, so to speak.
Well, they won't be anymore in ranked choice,
Well-
right? Because your vote will transfer. So you'll say, okay, I'm like one of those 4 candidates
Or 5,
or 5.
but you only get 3 choices, so.
Well, no, you can rank as many as you want. Like you can rank up to the number of candidates in the race.
Oh,
And you don't have to rank all of them. You can rank one lead. And you don't have to rank if you don't want to rank. So you have your choice. If you don't like the 2 or 3 candidates, you don't rank. Like, don't give them anything.
And that's the way that the ranked choice voting that you're voting on right now is organized. Alaska did it a little differently and they said you can only rank a certain number. But like, we're talking about pure art ranked choice voting here. That's what Ron's talking about. And that's what you're voting on here in Royal.
Okay.
Pure version where you can rank it.
I still think you could lose on that, but it might be better.
I'll help you think through some examples later.
Would you think that that number of candidates would even run under a ranked choice?
No, I think you could potentially have more.
Really?
I mean, I think, well, it's hard to say exactly, because that's probably a fairly hard slate already, right?
It's a lot.
But my point is across the country where it's implemented after a couple of cycles, the numbers go up. You get more candidates. Some cities now are trying to put a little higher limits on to be able to run because there's more people trying to run. And here's why. So if you're a libertarian or you're a Green Party person, right? And there's a Green Party person in that election, right? Okay, you see the polling, right? You know it, even if your candidate's good, probably not gonna win. Here's what's different. When I tell the Green Party libertarians, you may not still win. But think about how more powerful your voice becomes. Because the people that are more likely to win, the top 2 or 3 candidates more likely to win, now need your voters' votes. As a candidate, that gives you more power to get your voice and what you believe in included more into the candidates that are more likely to win because they need your votes. They need your voters to vote for them second. In Maine now, what you see, right? They know, okay, Jared, right? Jared now knows, Dem in Maine, now knows, okay, I'm not gonna get to 50%. They literally go to people's yards that have Tiffany or Will. They would never knock on those doors in plurality. They're now knocking on the doors and saying, look, I know you love Tiffany, right? But here's what Tiffany stands for. Here's what I stand for, right? Notice the pretty decent overlap. I stand for these things too. So if you're still going to vote for Tiffany, I'm not trying to tell you not to vote for Tiffany. Vote for me second. So candidates now don't look and focus on the differences. They focus on how am I similar? How am I going to get someone who loves another candidate to love me second? Or love me third. Love me do. Love me do. Whatever.
Love me do.
Sorry, I think I have an audience in here that would at least most of them get the we get the reference. Sorry. But that's the difference, right? Plurality voting, you are incented to try to get people not to vote for other candidates. It's not so much as getting people to vote for you. You're going to win, that's why negative campaigning has gotten so huge the last 30 years. You win by convincing people that the other candidates are devil.
So do you think, in this instance with Canada, that if, I know it's a guess because you don't know how they vote, but would somebody get 50% of the vote in this?
Oh yeah, I mean, ranked choice will produce mathematically absolutely will produce.
But if everybody doesn't rank, say this is my second, third, fourth,
you're getting-
fifth choice.
That's a very good point, right? So it does rely on people ranking, right?
Yes.
But think about it. Maybe they don't always get it the first election, but they'll get it the next if they didn't rank.
So
And their voice got eliminated, because think about it, you're educated, when you get this implemented, you're educated, like, you want to rank. Because the second if you don't rank, the second your candidate is eliminated, your voice is out of the process.
Yeah,
People want their voice in the process longer, right? So,
but I might only vote for 3. There might only be 3 on there, and somebody might.
and your vote will transfer, and then eventually it might not transfer anymore because you stop ranking.
But you could keep ranking.
Yeah, if the person who gets the most votes.
And to be honest, this is one of the challenges of ranked choice voting. We have a hard enough time now educating voters on who all the 8 candidates are. Now at least you can just say, I like this one first, I'm done. I'm just gonna vote for this one. In ranked choice, you do have to have a little more knowledge of the candidates, because if you want to rank, you gotta know what they stand for. You gotta know who you like first, second, third.
So if nobody got 50%, what would happen?
Yeah, so just like I showed you before in this example, in ranked choice, Lori would have gotten eliminated. They would have looked at her 1.2% ballots, right? They would have redistributed. That wouldn't have changed anything yet. It's only 1%, right? It's gonna take a little while to get up this chain until you get someone to 50%, right? Because these are 1, 2, 4%, right? So they're gonna have a little bit of an impact, but they're not gonna get someone to 50.
So even if people did not vote, rank every person on there, you would still get, you're saying you would get 50%.
Because of that exhausted ballot thing I said before, as soon as it's exhausted, it
So
it
total.
lowers the denominator, so you're always gonna get a 50%. So I don't know the outcome, but I think, and I know it's probably hard for the demographics in this room to maybe have ever felt this. Right, and this level of disenfranchisement in your community when it comes to voting. But you've got to, and New York City proved it in one cycle, right? I mean, you've got to assume that a lot of these voters down here, their second choice would have been probably one of these others. Second, third, or maybe fourth choice would have been one of these others, not necessarily Sheree. Now, I could be wrong. Like, there could be a lot of the Black voters who just said, I really like this person, but yeah, I mean, I think Sheree probably after that is, maybe Sheree would have still won. I'm just saying, it really doesn't matter. Because the issue you're trying to address is disenfranchisement. Right? At least if Sheree won with ranked choice, he got 50%.
Well, then you know.
You know,
Right now you
like,
don't know.
they can live with it.
Now you don't know.
But right now you don't know. They're feeling incredibly disenfranchised in their community because think about it, next cycle, if they have 7, they only have Blacks. There's only 3 or 4 Blacks in the base. They're still gonna split the vote. They don't need 8 to split it. It only takes, just like I was saying earlier, it only takes 2 Hispanics in a Hispanic community to split the vote. They can't ever get a Hispanic elected. Like year after year after year after year, they couldn't, it's frustrating for them.
Apparently, this has been around for a while.
Long time. Yeah.
How come we're just beginning to hear about it?
Money.
I mean,
Okay.
and I
Who in the
think
media, who drives the media?
Who drives the media?
1, 2.
Oh, the two parties.
What, money?
Parties.
Money.
You think the 2 parties?
No,
No.
no, they wouldn't, but, I mean, it's on our ballot. This is on our ballot.
Yeah.
And I'm here today because
Right, it's
I
not
don't
a
know
farce.
where I found out about it from, but when I read it, it was confusing to me, and I think I pretty much know what's going on.
Yes.
I guess my question is, other than volunteering and getting out there and doing like what we did, vote, for gerrymandering and stuff like that, how does the word get out to common next door neighbor, me, anybody else? That's my question.
Yeah.
And don't tell me you have to get out there and volunteer right now. I mean, I know that's the right answer,
Yeah.
but it has to be other way.
It takes a while. I mean, the advice we've gotten from Katie and from Jamie, right, 4 years ago already, was like, you need to get it on the ballot the year before. Like, you need to get all your signatures. If you want to do it in 2026, you got to get all your signatures in 2025, and that involves education. And then once it's on the ballot, you need a whole year to educate the whole state. Like, it takes time. The gerrymandering was the same thing. They were on the ballot the year before. It took them a whole year to get around and do just like we're doing here, but 100 times, like 1,000 times these number of sessions. And that's what they did with gerrymandering. Like that whole year, like they were out just every night. They were just educating. When we go statewide, that's gonna happen. To your point, we're a small organization with a lot of money. We do the best we can. The reason why we're at Royal Oak and East Lansing and Kalamazoo, and we passed Ann Arbor, is because that's where our biggest volunteer groups have been. We've got a strong pocket in Oakland County. We have a strong pocket in Ann Arbor, strong pocket in Lansing, strong pocket in Kalamazoo. Those are probably gonna be the 4 cities, 4 we pass. Wherever we have volunteers, right, that are willing to say, I'll educate the community, I'll get out there, I'll get the message out. That's where we sort of migrate to. Like, this wasn't a strategic choice. It was literally where we had the most of the volunteers and said, let's go.
Hey, Ron, when we're done too, I've got some literature that we have that's a little different than what you may have gotten in the mail, a little more into explaining how it works. So you can see me at the end if you want to just take 5 or 6 with you, if you have a neighbor or you want to talk.
Has a small graphic that explains what I showed in those slides.
Okay.
Very same thing, just a little more compact.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Do you need to leave?
No.
Oh, I like that answer. All right, got it.
One way to get the word out is for all of us to communicate with our church groups, family, friends, neighbors, ourselves. This topic never comes up in any of my casual conversations, but I can bring it up. And at least
I
get it
haven't
on
gotten to the
people's
ask yet,
minds.
so you're, what's the term when you, good segue? That's a good segue. But first, just a few more questions. The ask is pretty quick, so if you have any more questions.
I just wondered, is there a logical conclusion? What happens to money in politics with this? Does it change it?
I think that's what I was saying, like, I think it doesn't change. Like, there's nothing about it inherently changes, the money, the amount of money, it just lessens the impact. Right? right? So instead of that wealthy mayor continuing to get reelected with 30% of the vote every year because they just are incredibly funded and, right, all they have to do is win their base and they're in, right? That changes now.
And maybe
The
it's
money will still be
elected.
They might still get reelected, but
You know,
the bar is higher now, it's 50%.
Yeah.
So they better start appealing to more voters wealth of the
But
community.
in the beginning, they could be pushing
They
their
could.
candidate with millions. Okay.
there we go.
I mean, this doesn't, I don't think this increased the amount of money in, but it certainly doesn't,
Gotcha.
it's a small benefit, like, that's why I always have at the bottom of the slide, is split voting, negative campaign, that's the thing we wanna really nail you guys with, accountability, the 50% thing. Like, even if they are funded and they get in, they campaign now on broader messages in theory. So now, you darn well better have done that when you're in office, because the 50% bar is higher, the community will start saying, hey, she said this, he said this, they didn't do half of those things. 50% is a higher bar to get to. Right, that's the thing I want you guys to remember, 50% split voting, right, all that stuff.
Are you recommending this for both primary elections and
Yes.
the final election?
Yes, yep, statewide now. This is just the city, so statewide, it's,
You're
I'm
recommending,
going in with both the primaries, whatever race is mandated, whether it's governor, your federal, your state positions, it will be mandated for the general and any primary, no matter what party it is, would have to use ranked choice in the primary. And there's a big benefit, like people miss the benefit of the primary here in Michigan. At least right now,
Well, because that race that you're showing there, that's a primary.
yeah.
That
Huge
was.
impact in primary.
Three was.
The general is a little bit less, right? The general races, you've already kind of narrowed the field, but it doesn't, but 1 or 2% impact can really change behaviors of how those big races are run. It might not be like this bad, but Michigan is purple, man. Most good candidate races where both sides have good candidates, you're right at the 50-50, you're talking about 0.5%, 0.4% sides on it. So those 2% that went to libertarians and green or whatever, like those sides, the election, it becomes really powerful.
for a general election, if you have a two-party system, mathematically, someone's gonna get over 50%.
Correct.
So you already have for the regular general election, what you want,
Well,
Well, except that there's a libertarian.
unless you split the vote, but your solution is essentially split the vote super high. Because that's splitting the vote, if you have all those people there, the chances of anybody getting 50% out of a thing like that are.
it's 100% guaranteed.
No,
Someone's
and then right there, turn around and you'll see that group of 8 people or something.
Yeah,
That's a super split in a way.
But that's
The
because they didn't
chance
do ranked choice voting.
of chances for somebody, if that was a general election, getting 50% is almost nil.
With ranked choice voting was guaranteed.
It's
guaranteed.
guaranteed, yes.
It's a mathematical.
They keep
certainty.
eliminating.
But if you have only 2 people, other than the little split on the other
Oh, yeah.
thing, you already got 50%.
Well, of course, but that's actually what we're trying to get away from. We're trying to get more voices. That's what's happened in Michigan. We only have 2 options anymore.
You're trying to increase voting by people feeling like they have an
If
impact.
you have more candidates representing more people in the electorate, you're gonna get more people turning out over time. It might not happen right away. But over time, more candidates will start running. I mean, just in the 3 parties, just in the third parties right now, they aren't even running candidates. Last month, I presented to 2, I don't know if you know, in Michigan, now there's 2 libertarian groups, so I had to do it twice. But in the Libertarian Party, they're not even getting libertarians to run anymore. They are so frustrated. They can't get candidates to run. Like, why the hell should I run? I get on the ballot and you damn people don't even vote for me. You think you're gonna waste your vote? You don't even vote. I'm sticking my neck out to run for Libertarians or Green Party. You're not even voting for the Libertarian Green Party because of this whole mindset that you can only vote for the red or the blue because you're gonna waste your vote. This is what we're trying to get. We're trying to get more candidates in, stronger candidates, good ideas. that aren't just in this bucket, this bucket.
It'll bring in also people who stop voting because they think their vote doesn't count.
There's so many people, when you say turnout has gone down in Michigan, that's one of the biggest reasons. They feel like no one here really represents me. Like, no, yeah, go ahead. I've been pulling on you, I'm so sorry.
If no one, a candidate doesn't get presented, okay, so you do all the ranking and shifting, and there are 3 that are very close, then what? Do you,
And you still don't have 50%, and
you
there's
don't
3
have,
left?
no, there's 3, they're very close, so you don't have it. Then what's
then the one that still has the lowest of the three gets eliminated. And I'll tell you, that is a tough, that happens every once in a while, that is a tough situation. Because you have three that are so close, and you're potentially eliminating that third candidate, it might only be 40 votes from the second. Like super close. But, you know, look, it's not a perfect voting system, right? It's not perfect for sure, right? And no system is, by the way, there is no voting system that's perfect, they all have their sort of, in certain situations, not the best, right? But the reason why everyone is migrating to this the last 5 years is that when anyone does dig into the data, an average citizen digs in, looks at the various options, they come out with the same conclusion. Incentives. It may not be perfect, but this is driving the incentives we want. No negative campaigning, more candidates, more turnout, right? 50% winners, hold them accountable in office because they need 50% to get through. These are all metrics. These are all incentives we want. And we've been wanting for decades. How many of us have been voting for a long time? This is what we want the system to be, right? This helps get us back to there. Good.
I have a question from Zoom. How would ranked choice voting work for a multi-seat election such as Royal Oak City Commission?
Great question. You guys have not asked this question already. Okay, so really simple, and I really should get a graphic for this. All three of our cities do this.
What was the question?
The question was, this explains a single winner, right? 50%. I get it. You guys all got it now, right? Like,
Right.
you're still, I'm still gonna know you're still absorbing it and under what situations, right? I know you're still, but what I want to explain is multi-winner. In mathematics, right? Because we always think of majority being 50%, right? Because you are always picking one, you're picking one thing for dinner, you're picking one, whatever, you're picking one. Multi-winner, this concept is exactly the same. So what we'll be implementing here is called a single transferable vote, right? Which is a multi-winner. Works exactly the same way conceptually, the bar just comes down. So in mathematics, when there's two winners,
Let's say there's three.
well, let's do two, because I'll get.
Okay.
So if there's two winners instead of one, the threshold drops to 33%. Because in mathematics, when there's two winners, the majority by definition in a two winner is 33%. So as soon as any one of those, let's say this is a multi-winner race, right? You keep eliminating until someone gets to 33%. And then that first person is in. And then you keep going until somebody else gets over 33%, and then they're in, and then you're done. Now take that to three winner, which is generally in ranked choice is the furthest they recommend. They don't recommend you going far behind it, farther much more than you don't recommend 4 and 5 winner races, because then it does get to the much more likely that someone doesn't get over the threshold. Because there's just too many ballots that are exhausted. So it just drops from 33% to 25%. But the incentives, everything is exactly the same. So in a three winner, the majority is 25%. So in this example, in the first round, if this was a multi-winner, if this was for city council for Ann Arbor, right? I'm sorry, Royal Oak. Not a lot of Ann Arbor presentation. So if this was for city commission here, Sheree would have won in the first round. He had more than 25%. And so he's in. And then you just keep going until, you know, this one's at 23%, which is about there. You would already be pretty close to your second candidate getting over the threshold. You just keep going until you get the three candidates over that threshold. So I know that doesn't sound weird, that 25% is now a majority, but if you think about it long enough, that's just how a mathematical definition of a three outcome race that defines majority. So nothing else is different.
I mean, they're running for so many seats. They have a seat, you know, we have, you know, Amanda, Rebecca, like Fournier, you know. That's it.
Yep.
So, you know, it's a little more,
3 seats and 6 candidates.
these are so discreet to me, you know, they're running for a seat. And I think in the past, you know, there's 2-year seats and there's 4-year seats for city commission. So. Is that right?
Well, not in the same way, so I think it's always random. They all should be right, or staggered, 4 years staggered. So, yeah, that's.
So it may not really.
Now, I think it's important to understand that in a multi-winner, you end up getting, it's not the perfect, proportional representation. I mean, a pure proportional representation race is what it is, right? That's used in some countries and to elect their office. So it doesn't get to the purality of proportional, but this starts to get close. Right? So if whatever your ideology is of your community, you broke it up. A ranked choice multi-winner is gonna get you much closer to elected officials that sort of break out to that. Like, you know how we're talking about the people of color in New York City and how now the council looks like the population? With this, for city councils, you get much more over time, a council that is a little more diverse representative of your community. So, I'm gonna say this because that's the truth. If you have a city council that has 8, right, elected officials in this kind of format, and 20% of your community is conservative, you're likely gonna have a conservative person on your council, on your commission. Okay, this audience, you might recoil at that, but that's, isn't that how it should be? Like, just because the community is 70%, highly progressive, we should have all progressives in the city commission, right? Now, again, I'm not saying it gets the exact, community perfect all the time, but it moves towards that, right? You're gonna get folks, more people in the community, at least have someone on the council that sort of represents them.
Hey, Ron, there was one thing that you asked Miss where you said, oh, I might only really like 3 of them. And one thing that just kind of practice, as you talk to people, they'll ask, oh my God, I gotta know all 7 people and rank all 7 people. Let's be realistic. You usually know who the front runners are gonna be. Let's call them Republican and Democrat. You might like somebody who's a newer candidate. They're your neighbor. They're great, but they don't have word of mouth. Once you get to one of the people who's the front runner, you probably don't have to rank after that. In most cases, you're not gonna have to rank all 7. You're gonna rank maybe up to half of the candidates. You know what I mean? For the libertarian example, you rank libertarian, then you choose, you like Republican or Democrat better. And it's more interesting at the local level because you have candidates that aren't so ideologically aligned, they're more based on, specific, initiatives, specific, platform, I don't know, whatever. Go ahead.
Okay,
How come you?
okay, I have one question. Okay, so I'm not talking about, one candidate, like if you have a multi, like, okay, so it's gonna be, so I'll use the easy example, 2. The top 2 have to get 33%. So we'll just say the top candidate got 35%.
In the
So they
first
were
round.
the clear winner. But I voted for candidate number 6, who clearly lost out, but my second rank was the candidate who
Is
got the
already
most
in.
vote. So my vote still rolls
Well,
up to
it goes
them
to them, but if they're already out, because not, in this case, not because they were eliminated, but because they're already in.
because they
Then
won.
your vote will go to your 3rd candidate, whoever's.
If I put a third one, but if I didn't put a third
Then-
one,
then you're
then
out.
I'm done doing it.
Yeah.
So once they clearly won, like when there's more than one candidate, we're talking, then you're trying to pick the second. So you basically eliminated the top one and the bottom one.
Right.
There's one.
More or
Like
less.
if there's only 2 candidates, for sure, the top one has to get 50% until they get that 50%, over 50.
Yeah, you keep eliminating them so someone gets it.
So, okay,
Yeah.
okay, so then it
Yeah.
equals you to.
It's one of, and I wish Kevin Deegan Kraus is here, because he is he's been pretty well known across the country. He is a poli-sci expert within poli-sci, expert on elections at Wayne State University. And he will tell you, this is one of the hardest things to gain. And it's funny because you just don't know, like, polling can give you some information, but you don't know who's really gonna vote for 2nd or 3rd. Like, you can't really predict anything and figure out how to game it because you just don't know, there's not enough data. So that's what makes it powerful, so hard to game, and that's.
So in theory, you could like in this election, you've got 9 people, and you just go, this is my favorite, and then all the way down to 9, and my vote will be powerful no matter what. Because,
The more you vote, the stronger and more powerful your vote is, because your voice is in the process longer.
so is there a downside to this? Because in everything in life.
Great question,
But-
again. So,
Sorry,
education.
Yeah.
Any place that influence has to educate. New York, educate the living crap out. Right? I mean, that's, right? Communities sometimes have to figure out how to spend a little bit more money to figure out how can they create a vehicle to get more information about candidates out to their voters. But don't we want all that anyway? And if we don't have it in our community, shouldn't we? Should it really be this hard to understand who the 7 voters are and what they stand for? So a lot of communities do those two things, educate on how it works, so when people walk in there, they're comfortable. They're not gonna be totally comfortable first time, once they do it once, they're like, nah, that's easy. Okay. So get them comfortable, educate them, money.
Yeah, well.
Okay, so, it doesn't come into play in terms of the actual logistics and how it changes incentives. But the state and the communities have to come with money to implement it. You have to create a certified process. That's what the Bureau of Elections has not done so far for Ferndale and Ann Arbor. And why you're seeing communications go around about how this currently can't be enacted right away.
But to be fair, that's like a one-time cost to get the certified process.
Yeah, we just gotta get them to do it, right?
Right.
But once you create the certified process, every single city everywhere can use it if they want to.
And the downside that you'll see some opposition people say is that like, oh, you need different machines and you need different. All the machines that are modernly available and are purchased can take in a ranked choice voting ballot. There is the process that you need, but like this.
So the machines in Royal will do this.
Yes, so, and that's another thing I want to clarify in the flyer that went out, which is incorrect. So Michigan uses 3 scanners, HART, ESS, and Dominion. All 3 of them do ranked choice voting. On every single machine, it's literally a flip of the switch to be able to take in a ranked choice ballot. Now, I don't want to simplify that too much. It still has to be tested. You still want to make sure the computer software says this is how it's going to do it. You got to test it. That's where the certification comes in. And we would never want to do a ranked choice election without certification. Like we want to make sure that it's thoroughly tested. Every scenario that could happen where someone fills out, how is it going to be handled? Like all that has to be taken care of in your certification. We want to make sure there's a process, the machines that do that. Now, the machines do it. The one little caveat I will say is that they all have the ranked choice software in them, but some cities have older versions of Dominion software. They may not have the newest, they might not all be on the same version of software. So if you're going to implement it, you have to make sure that at least every city has to upgrade to the most current version. So they're all in the same version.
And they're upgrading their software for first past the post
Yeah,
standard.
these cities are doing this all the time. Some do it more often, some do a little less, but they're always upgrading, right? They're always upgrading.
So on the equipment level, we have it basically, it
Yep.
just has to be fine tuned.
Every
But there has to be
precinct in
some
Michigan-
laws in place to allow it though.
Yeah, so what the Bureau of Elections is pointing to is they're pointing to a couple of different statutes. If you don't know, East Point has done this 3 times. Anybody here know that? East Point has used ranked choice 3 times by a Department of Justice consent decree. So they've done it already. Now, they had a little, because the government sort of forced them to do it, they had a little get out of jail free card, for lack of a better term. To make sure that when they did the ranked choice election, it wasn't gonna bump up against any statutes. Those 3 statutes, there's 3 of them. After the ranked choice election actually done it and executed and did it in East Point, 2 of those 3 are now moot point. They've already been confirmed that the concern on those 3 items, when it was actually implemented, met the criteria. There is one statute that is really the bugaboo. And that statute says that when you vote in Michigan, you can only vote for 1 candidate. Right? You can't vote for 2. And it's kind of in the section of the election law. It is all those rules that are very clear to tell you when, if you vote wrong, to be very clear that your vote won't count for that, if you vote for 2, like today, for plurality voting, you're only allowed to vote for 1. If you vote for 2, your vote won't count on that seat. Unless the scanner unless you're doing it in person, the scanner dings at you and tells you, hey, you messed this up, you want to redo it. If you don't redo it, that's fine. Everything will count except for that election, that candidate, your vote won't count because you did it wrong. Right? Now, similar to the challenges that ranked choice had in Maine that held up in federal court and the Supreme Court sustained, we feel that if they were sued, if Ferndale actually sued the state and said, you can't look at that statute as the reason to do it, there's sort of an argument you can make there that we actually are only voting for 1 at one time. We're not really, so there is interpretation. I'm not saying we feel that way. I'm not saying we're right. A judge would have to listen to the arguments of the Bureau of Elections, listen to our arguments and say what is true. But here's the thing that trumps all that. And I hate to use that word. Here's the thing that trumps all that is
Overrides.
Overrides, thank you.
There we go.
In the Michigan Constitution, as well as 16 other states, there's something called the Home Rule City Act. The Home Rule City Act gives cities, if you're an incorporated city in the state of Michigan, gives you the constitutional right to do your own thing in 8 areas. I don't know them all, so sorry, but I know one of them is how they elect their leaders. The city is constitutionally given the right to elect their leaders however they want to. If they want to draw straws, they can draw straws. You have to have a certified process. Make sure that it's defined properly, executed the way you defined it, you know. But if they want to draw straws, they are constitutionally. So here's what a constitutional lawyer, and I have handouts I can give you of the review that's done. And here's the way a person with constitutional experience here put it to us. The example of the reason why this is hands down, we will win, is because the state pointing to a statute that said this is the reason why a city can't execute their constitutional right will fail every time. The state can't point to a statute. The judge would say, you need to change statute. You can't, and the analogy is civil rights in the 60s, the Supreme Court comes down and says, the little girl can't sit in the back of the bus, right? Not allowed. Can't make him sit in the back of the bus or whatever. And, you know, Alabama kind of says, oh, we have a statute. A little statute over here that says, little girl has to sit in the back of the bus. Don't worry about that. You have a constitutional right, then the Bureau of Elections is required then to make sure that you can execute the Constitution. And any person that has constitutional experience in Michigan that's looked at that and said, it's pretty rock solid. Now, that statute should be changed, but that's the job. And the reason why we have so many statutes in Michigan is that they change them all the time. Michigan is like the highest rated state for the number of election law statutes, which is cumbersome, but it's actually good. We have one of the tightest, most secure elections in the whole country. And we've done a great job here in Michigan. They change it all the time. So the judge would basically say, you are holding the city to not be able to execute their constitutional right, change the damn statute. That's what the judge would tell them. Now, that's where we're stuck. We don't have enough money. Ferndale is actually willing to be the plaintiff. From what, from the city council folks we talked to, they're willing to be the plaintiff. The problem is, needs some money. And the truth is, it could take a couple of years. We'll probably do our statewide ballot constitution in 2026 by the time that legislation would ever get passed, right? And if we do a constitutional amendment, it takes care of all this. Like, this just clears the road. We never have to worry about.
Ron, I'm sorry, I have to go.
Yeah.
That's off to you. Just for anybody else who knows, when Ron gets to the ask, I do have a couple of sheets. And people are passionate about this because they found out more and they do actually want to walk around and talk to other Royal Oak neighbors. I got some sheets that Ron and William will.
Sorry, I should have cut it off because I love talking about this. I'll talk about it more. But I mean, 4 years of this, I think I'm more passionate talking about it now than I was when we started. So before we do one more question, we'll do it after. I'm gonna give the ask. Look, it's late. It's what? It's 14th, right? I think 10% of the people have already voted. How many here have already voted? Did you vote yes?
Yeah, oh, yes, of course.
Okay, so, the thing I would ask, because look, there's only so much we can do. Obviously, if you want to volunteer and drop lid, if you're welcome already for another candidate, drop our lid with us. We'll, just contact you how we do it. All I ask at this point, call, email. If you like what you're hearing, tell everybody that you know in Royal Oak who's a voter and say, vote for this, right? I know we can't do it right away in Royal Oak, but we're never going to get the Bureau of Elections to do it until we get 8 or 10 cities to pass it. It's going to force their hand, right? It gets to the voters, not politicians message again, right? Voters want this, politicians aren't doing it, right? And that wins big in Michigan. We have a pretty good track record on that narrative. So that's what I asked for. Can you get out, call everyone you know, explain this to them? And if you have more questions, we'll keep talking. But contact us. We'll get a hold of anybody. We'll have people answer any questions that people have to make sure they understand it and aren't, duped by what other people tell them, which is usually not, accurate or truthful.
And one observation, you have made some very mighty bold predictions. For saving all the ills of,
Thank you.
American democracy. And for some, it's convincing.
I got it. And hopefully no one thinks this is a silver bullet. If you've ever read the American Anti-Corruption Act, there's actually 7 or 8 pillars in it, right? Not one, like gerrymandering alone doesn't solve everything, right? You gotta do a number of things. Voter access, we've done a great job here. We've attacked that pillar pretty well. Mail-in voting, voter access, get rid of gerrymandering, right? Ranked choice voting, right? There's 7 or 8 pillars to how we fit our democracy with reform. It's just one pillar. It doesn't solve all the ills. Hopefully I don't come across like if we do this, everything is dreamland. It's just one thing. There is issues with plurality, and this doesn't affect money, doesn't get money out of it, doesn't affect that pillar, but it affects the plurality flaws that we have in our elections that we gotta get rid of.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I just want to say, I'm still, and I don't mean, I love what you said, there was a lot of really good, I didn't really think about it. But I am leaning pro, but it goes back to that very first example you gave us of the Asian and black guys and the white. I still could see how the white guy could still win. Because if you're ranking all the black guys, all the numbers are all together different, the white guy could still win. Or
But if they win, they got 50%. The voters
Yeah.
voted in 50%.
Okay, yeah,
I mean.
well, that's true, you're back to.
I mean, it shouldn't be all about color. I mean,
Yeah.
if they're a good
No,
candidate, they're a good
right.
candidate, right? So, yeah, but I guess my point is that it's that disenfranchisement we've seen the last 10, 20, 30 years. That's what we're trying to address. Go ahead.
Does, like, after the election, that's just the results of each round, like you showed us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we try to do that every time we present. It's very powerful. Kevin did a great job. with that.
You know, what I mean is, if Royal Oak were to implement this for years, would, if we in the newspaper, wanted to do a breakdown, round 1, round 2.
That's a great, that's another great. And that's one thing ranked choice has to do. There's no interim update. There's no interim results. You don't calculate ranked choice until all the ballots are in. And you gotta certify all the ballots. If you don't, you're missing 10 ballots. You have to have them in. Takes a little bit more time. And then it takes more real estate to express how they want. You have to show, here's round 1, just like I did. You gotta show round 1, here's how the number of voters switched over to here, here's round 2, here's round 3. You have to show that. And we would put that in the Constitution. For that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pretty much everything.
People are coming out and so.
Exit polling has to be